the masters of India in the West who explained the teaching in treatises, and the eminent monks of China and Japan clarified the great sage's true intent in appearing in this world, and revealed that Amida's primal Tao accords with the nature of all beings. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning, everyone. Today we have a very special service today because it is our annual Eitaikyo service. For those of you who do not know, this service is something that we celebrate every year in commemoration and appreciation for all of the past members who have contributed so much of their time and energy and capital effort into making this temple what it is today. And this is, as you all know, you are all sitting here in the Tacoma Buddhist Temple right now. And especially for the Dharma School students, I'd like to bring up this wonderful temple and just actually ask all of us to stop and consider, right? We walk into this building and we come into, if we can make it, we come to the temple every Sunday and we sit down and we listen, we chant, and we spend time with each other. And we often don't think about all the past members who put a lot of their effort and their time into building this temple here. And when we think about it, space or having space, right, having a building or having a space where we can come and learn is very, very precious. It's a gift for all of us, right? And I notice here I put in parentheses, it's important not to take this building for granted, right? It is so precious that we are all able to come here, that we all have, different rooms, different spaces here, that we can share in the Dharma with all of each other. And so, with that being said, right, we have to think about all of the efforts, who put the time and the effort in putting this building together, right? So when students, right, when you go off to school, right, yes, I know that sometimes school can be a bit annoying, or getting up to go to school can be a bit daunting, and sometimes, there are friends you really like to see, but there might be people at school that you don't really like to see. Sometimes there's a teacher who, you're not particularly fond of, right? But at the same time, think about how precious it is that you have a space where you can go and receive your education. It's important to remember that, buildings like this, buildings like your school, even buildings like your home, are places that are not meant to be taken for granted. Your education is not meant to be taken for granted. Yes, it is required that you do go to school, but isn't it wonderful that you have a school to go to with teachers who are really giving a lot of their time and effort into teaching you wonderful things. And when I read the quote this morning, Shinran Shonin, our master, also recognizes how important it is to thank the previous teachers and people who came before to, realize that they are the reason that we are here today. But this service, Eitaikyo, right? What is the meaning of this? And I apologize, the text is a little bit small. So this is a lesson not to sit in the back. But anyways, let's actually talk about the meaning of the word Eitaikyo, right? So the first word, A, right, E-I, can mean forever, or it can mean eternal. It can mean always, or perpetual, right, continuously. Tai, the second one, Tai or Dai, means generation, era, or replace, okay? And then the last one, Kyo. Kyo means sutra, or the teaching of Buddha, right? So altogether, it literally means the service of generations perpetually chanting the sutras. It implies that there is this continuous line going from our ancient ancestors all the way down to us today, to future generations. I can already see from sitting here, from all of you sitting here, that we have at least 3 generations sitting in the congregation today. One of the most beautiful things I think that we do as a congregation, as different generations, is chant the words of Shakyamuni Buddha together, right? And why do we chant sutras? This is a really neat picture, I think, of the first part, or of the top half of a scroll. And if you didn't notice it, the first 2 letter kanji characters there are Bu-setsu, or the Buddhist sutra, right? And actually, the top part and the kanji characters are very, very small, but that's the Amida Sutra. That is the sutra that we chanted this morning. So it's a sutra that covers this whole scroll, and I think it's a really neat scroll to look at if you can look at the whole thing. But why do we read sutras, right? What's the point of all of this, right? In some schools of Buddhism, you read sutras to get karmic merit, right? Like you're storing brownie points, or you're getting good karmic brownie points to lead you to a better lifetime in the next life, right? Others, you are chanting sutras for the sake of your past relatives, right? You are, you're chanting so your relatives who have passed away can be reborn in a better life. But in Jodo Shinshu, in our school of Buddhism, our past relatives have already been born in the Pure Land. Therefore, we chant the sutras simply to show our respect and to show our adoration and thankfulness to Shakyamuni Buddha for teaching us the ways of Amida Buddha and the Pure Land. So, sutras are a way that we remember the Buddha's words. And once again, this is what makes a sutra, right? So if someone comes up to you and asks you, right, like in college or later on in life, I hear this word sutra a lot. What is a sutra? You tell them it's a text where the Buddha, it's a text where the Buddha spoke, okay? It's a text that's been written down that shares the words of the Buddha, okay? So not Reverend Tadao Koyama, not Master Shinran, not Master Shan Dao or any of the other 7 masters, only Shakyamuni Buddha. That's what makes a sutra. And we take refuge in these sutras as well. Reciting sutras is actually part of, part of our tradition. In fact, it's actually part of most Buddhist traditions. So for, the reasoning might be different for the various traditions, right? But one of the things that we all share with other schools of Buddhism is that we all have some aspect of chanting a sutra. Zen Buddhists love chanting the Heart Sutra. Nichiren Buddhists love chanting the Lotus Sutra. We Jodo Shinshu Buddhists like chanting the larger sutra, or the sutra on the Buddha of immeasurable light and life. This is in fact part of most Buddhist traditions, right? This is why we do this. We are taking refuge in the Buddhist teaching. So Dharma school students, when, as we continue with, coming to temple, right? And some of you are probably seniors in high school now. You're probably going to be graduating soon. You're probably going to be leaving to go off to college, right? Never forget the preciousness of the temple and the community that you belong to. It is true, right? We as Buddhists, like to talk about non-attachment, or a building is just a building. But when you think about it, a building is not just a building. The temple is not just this place, this random place that came up from out of nowhere. It was a group of people who came together to build a sacred space, to allow all people of all generations to come and enjoy the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And they believed, or they had trust in this teaching so strongly that they ensured that this tradition and that this building could continue can continue on through the generations. Hence, that is the reason why we call this service Eitaikyo. It's not just to remember the past loved ones who who we remember and thank for their efforts in building this temple. But it's also a hope and a call to the future that we will continue to chant these sutras. That after we are long gone, that this temple will still be here with people, far generations from you, continuing to take refuge in the sutras of the Buddha of immeasurable light and life. So Dharma School students, please take this time, especially since it's November and next week is Thanksgiving, right? I couldn't think of a better service that coincides with the holiday of Thanksgiving, right? This is a chance for us to really thank and remember our past loved ones and thank and acknowledge the hard work our parents, our grandparents, and your community members around you and your teachers. All, give a chance to thank all of them for all of their efforts. Really, describe to them how deep your gratitude is. And this is why, again, we call this service Eitaikyo. So thank you very much for listening to the Dharma School service today. In closing, will you all please join me in Gassho. The masters of India and the West who explained the teaching in treatises and the eminent monks of China and Japan clarified the great sage's true intent in appearing in this world and revealed that Amida's primal vow accords with the nature of beings. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Will you all please join me in Gassho again, as I once again recite the words of Master Shinran. The masters of India and the West who explained the teachings and treatises and the eminent monks of China and Japan clarified the great sage's true intent in appearing in this world and revealed that Amida's primal vow accords with the nature of beings. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Good morning again, everyone. Good morning. Oh, are you all okay? It's been a while since we've chanted the entirety of the Amida Sutra, so it must feel a little bit like you ran a marathon, right? To keep up. It wasn't actually that long ago when we were still in the midst of the pandemic that Kuwahara Sensei of the Berkeley Buddhist Temple had a project for a lot of us ministers. And we did this virtual chanting of all three of the Pure Land Sutras, the whole things in their entirety. And we had about, I think, 20 to 25 ministers from all over the place. We had ministers from BCA, Canada, and we had ministers from Japan and from Hawaii. We all kind of tag-teamed the various parts of the three Pure Land Sutras. So that was a lot of fun, actually. And I kind of hope to do it again at some point where we can have a full-on event where we chant all three of the sutras. But we have to have kind of a continuous stream of ministers to help do this, as well as take breaks in between, because chanting all three of the sutras can take up to I think about 4 hours, I believe. So it's quite a long process. But don't worry, that won't be like a regular Sunday service or anything like that. We'll designate it as a special event. So once again, this service is called Eitaikyo, and I really love chanting Amida Kyo for this particular service and having us chant the whole sutra because, again, right, this holiday or this memorial service actually implies that we are continuously chanting the sutras of our past ancestors and our past teachers as well, right? So every time we chant the sutra, we are honoring and thanking Shakyamuni Buddha for his teaching that saves all sentient beings, and that is the teaching of Amida Buddha. That is the teaching of Bodhisattva Dharmakara crossing 10 kalpas to save humanity from the cycle of suffering. Right? That's why we are Buddhists, because we know that to exist or to be human means to, be cleaned, or means to be stuck with the everyday, kleshas or imperfections that make us unenlightened, right? And this is the whole point of Buddhism, is to help us become enlightened and to get off the wheel of samsara. But what does this have to do with generations, right? The easy answer to this, of course, is our connection is not only with our past relatives because we have a familial attachment to them, but our commonality with taking refuge in the teachings. Okay, so a lot of you know that last weekend I actually went to the Palo Alto Buddhist Temple. For those of you who came to the Northwest Convention, you had the pleasure of seeing my uncle, Reverend Dean Koyama. He gave a beautiful keynote speech for the Northwest Convention. But also before the Northwest Convention, he contacted me and said, I'm coming up for the Northwest Convention, so I'd like you to come down for one of our services. So we chose to have it for Eitaikyo. And and I was more than happy to accept the invitation. And plus, I never say no to my uncle. But saying no to my uncle and my family is a dangerous thing to do. So, but I also took this time as well, since I was down in since I was down south in California, I wanted to take a chance to revisit some of my roots. Now, this is not the Palo Alto Buddhist Temple. This is the Buddhist Church of Lodi. How many of you, show of hands, have been to Lodi in California before? 1, 2, 3, 4. So for those, and 5, of course, from you, Kawa. For those of you who have been to Lodi, have you been to the Buddhist Church of Lodi before? Oh, okay. It's a wonderful church, and it always has a special feeling for me when I go visit there. Why? Because, and I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see, but it was through my grandparents that I discovered the importance of the temple community. I had, and I don't mean to brag, but I had some of the greatest grandparents I think a boy could ask for. My grandfather, Kinji Hiramoto, who is my mother's father, by the way, was a temple community leader in Lodi. I remember going on walks with my grandfather when I stayed over at his house in Lodi. They would go on these morning walks, and these people who would seem random would pass by, and he would know their names, he'd say hello, and he'd ask them how they're doing, and he was always very involved with the community of Lodi. There were constants at the Buddhist Church of Lodi, and when I was back down south in California, I took the chance to go to Lodi and actually visit my grandparents' columbarium at the Lodi Cemetery. And standing next to him in this picture is his loving wife and my grandmother, Terio Hiramoto. And she was also a very, very much a strong and solid member of the Buddhist Church of Lodi. I have memories of my grandparents and their involvement with the temple. And of course, Obon being one of the most fun festivals to go to as a kid. I would always remember my grandfather was the person who would be standing up on the stage outside calling out the numbers for bingo. And my grandmother was dutifully inside of the social hall annex in Lodi, putting together the teriyaki chicken bento dinners, right? So, she would be the ones to help sort it, put the teriyaki chicken, the chirashi, the cabbage, right? And I would always remember as a little grandchild, I would wave to her through the screen, and she would always wave back. So it was through my grandparents that I, really found the importance of the temple community. And, I can, leave this up or at some point or, after the service is done. But for those of you who are wondering, there is a long history of Jodo Shinshu in my family. What you are seeing here is the Hiramoto gravesite, my mother's family's gravesite in Lodi. That headstone is actually quite large, and it has the family crest on either side. But and it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but at the very top of their headstone is the wisteria, or the Sagara Fujimon, which is our symbol of Nishi Honganji, or Jodo Shinshu Honganji Ha. Okay? And so for my great-grandparents, the temple was also a very important community for them to be a part of. The headstone has their names in Japanese. On the bottom, there are their secular worldly names, and on the top are their Buddhist names. So, it was very, very meaningful for me to go and visit their gravesite. And this picture actually was taken right when I visited them this past weekend. And so I really felt this strong emotional attachment when I went back to the gravesite of my past ancestors in Lodi. But as you all know, my Koyama side, my father's side, also has a strong history in Jodo Shinshu as well. And of course, as you all know, I am the current minister of the Tacoma Buddhist Temple, but I am not the first Koyama to serve at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple. And when I showed this picture at the Palo Alto Buddhist Temple, people were starting to laugh, and I said, who is this handsome young man right here depicted? This is, for those of you who do not know, this is my uncle, Reverend Dean Koyama, or Reverend Myose Koyama. And he served here at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple over 20 years ago, actually 30 years ago, 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. But he served up here in the Northwest for quite a long time. And it was very nice for him to come back up to revisit his, his first part of his journey of being a minister here in the United States after he came back from Japan. So I was, this past weekend for Eitaikyo and going into this weekend was just filled with a large sense of nostalgia. But then once again, coming to realize, right, it's not just the family ties, but the teachings and the religion that ties us together. If the teachings were not relevant or helpful today, I don't believe that the temples here in the United States would have the vibrant communities that they have, nor would I think that they could continue. It's not just the communities and the parties and everything, but it's also the teachings that bind us together. Once again, going back to Shinran Shonin's quote here, you notice he thanks all of the Indian masters, the Chinese masters, and the Japanese masters who came before him, listing out the 7 masters like Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Tanlawan, Daochuo, Shandao, Genshin, and Honen. Master Shinran actually only met one of these 7 masters, and that was Master Honen, who he considered a direct teacher. But all these other masters who came before him, including Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, had this profound influence on his sense and his understanding of the teachings of Jodo Shinshu, or the teachings of the Pure Land. How these masters wrote and the influence that it had on him shaped the way that he teaches his teaching today. And if it were not for one of these masters, right, if Nagarjuna had not existed, if Vasubandhu hadn't existed, even if Honen had not been there, right? Someone as close as Honen, would we have the teachings of Jodo Shinshu today? Would we have this temple? I highly doubt it. Every time we chant the Shoshin-ge, right, we are showing our gratitude to Master Shinran for all of his teachings. So when we go to Ho'onko next year to Seattle, we will be chanting a version of Shoshin-ge where it's with the Junidai melody. But I'd also like to get the Tacoma Buddhist Temple to once again start becoming familiar with and being able to chant the Shoshin Nembutsuge as well. And once again, right, this particular chant of Shoshin-ge is something that all Buddhist ministers have to memorize in order to become ordained. Every time we chant the Shoshin-ge, or we are honoring and thanking the 7 masters for their contributions to our understanding. Right? Looking back at all these teachers, right? Of course, I don't expect all of you to become, to memorize all of the 7 masters' teachings, but just have this profound understanding and realization that without these 7 masters, once again, this temple would not be here. And then when stopping to think about it, I'm almost overwhelmed with how much I owe my past ancestors and many of the Buddhist teachers for putting me on this path. Just thinking about my path alone as a minister, there were so many things that had to be that had to be at the right place at the right time, right? Not to say that it's fate or that it's, or that, this is something that was predestined. But without any of these past elements, would I be here talking to you today, right? My grandparents, deep involvement with the temple. My, the 7 masters teaching Master Shinran, right? Would there be any, part of me up here today? In fact, one could even argue, if I hadn't seen my Uncle Dean, Reverend Dean Koyama, in his ministerial robes, in his ministerial context, would I also choose the path of becoming a Buddhist priest? I don't think so. All of these elements have played a role into why I became a priest. So often, right, in the past, people have asked me, well, why did you want to become a Buddhist priest? And I said, oh, it's a very long story. So this Dharma talk serves as a part of an answer to that long story here. But I hope that we all can come to realize that this is, that all of this, all that we are learning, all that we are sometimes taking for granted, comes from a deep history of past people putting in their hard work, putting in their efforts, their profession, their teaching, to make sure and ensure that this teaching continues on to future generations. So with that being said, I want to thank you all again for taking part in today's special service of Eitaikyo. If you hadn't noticed, Eitaikyo is actually one of my favorite things to celebrate, or events to celebrate here at the temple. I love chanting sutras. I hope we can continue to chant sutras, and that we can learn new chants like the Ojo Rai-san or Hanju-san as my time at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple continues. So once again, thank you all very much for joining me today for our Eitaikyo service. In closing, will you please join me in Gassho? The masters of India and the West who explained the teachings and treatises, and the eminent monks of China and Japan clarified the great sage's true intent in appearing in this world, and revealed that Amita's primal vow accords with the nature of beings. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.